the village of shadows. Nestled in the shadow of the ancient and foreboding whispering pines, the village of Elmwood was a cluster of thatched cottages and smoke-curling chimneys, where the air always carried the tang of pine resin and the faint metallic whisper of fear. The villagers spoke of the forest in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward the tree line as if the very shadows might hear. Generations had lived under the curse, a malevolent force known as the Shadow Wraith, a spirit said to hunger for souls. It had not always been this way. Legends told of a time when the forest sang with life, its heart a sanctuary for healers and seekers. But a betrayal centuries past had twisted it into a labyrinth of gnarled oaks and thorn-choked paths, where even sunlight seemed to drown. Elara, a young woman of 19 with storm-gray eyes and a resolve as unyielding as the mountains, had heard the tales all her life. Her brother Cale, 2 years her senior, had been the village's hope, a gifted woodsman who'd ventured beyond the safe trails to hunt game. But a year ago, he'd crossed into the forbidden depths and vanished. The villagers mourned him as another victim of the Wraith, but Elara refused to believe it. Her dreams were haunted by his laughter, his voice urging her to find me. The Council of Elders. The elders convened beneath the sagging beams of the meeting hall, the scent of damp wool and peat smoke thick in the air. Elder Mara, her face a map of wrinkles, slammed her staff against the floor. The forest consumes the reckless. Child, she snapped, her voice like gravel. Your brother's fate should be lesson enough. Elara's fists tightened. Cale isn't dead. I'd feel it, know it, if he were. Her voice wavered, but her gaze held Mara's. The Wraith took him for a reason. Maybe he's still alive, in some way. Muttering erupted. Old Tomas, his hands trembling, leaned forward. The Wraith doesn't take prisoners. It corrupts. If your brother lives, he's no longer the boy you knew. Elara's throat tightened. She'd heard the stories of those rare souls who'd returned, hollow-eyed, babbling of a cold light, their skin etched with black veins. But Cale was strong. He'd fight it. I have to try, she said quietly. Mara sighed, her sternness softening. Bravery is no match for the Wraith. But if you go, take this. She pressed a small iron pendant into Elara's palm, a charm etched with a sunburst. Iron and light repel the dark. It may buy you moments. Into the thorns. At dawn, Elara stood at the forest's edge, the pendant warm against her chest. The trees loomed, their branches clawing at the sky. She stepped over the boundary stone, its surface carved with fading runes, and the air shifted. It was colder here, the light dimmed as if the sun itself feared the Wraith. Birdsong died. The only sound was the crunch of dead leaves underfoot. The path narrowed, thorns snagging her cloak. She slashed at them with her dagger, her breath quickening. Shadows writhed at the corners of her vision, coalescing into shapes that hissed her name. Elara, turn back. She gripped the pendant, its heat a comfort. Cale, she whispered, and the shadows retreated. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes, the forest warped time. She stumbled into a clearing where the ground was littered with bones, their surfaces slick with moss. A low growl echoed. From the underbrush slithered a creature of nightmares, a wolf-sized beast with too many eyes and a mouth full of needle teeth. It lunged. Elara sidestepped, slashing with her dagger. The blade bit deep, and the creature dissolved into smoke, its scream lingering. The heart of darkness. Deeper in the woods, the trees grew denser, their trunks fused into a living wall. Elara pressed a hand to the bark and felt a pulse, a heartbeat. The forest was alive, watching. She squeezed through a crack, emerging into a grove bathed in eerie silver light. At its center stood a pool, its surface mirror-still, and there, reflected in the water, was Cale. He looked as she remembered, his crooked smile, the scar above his eyebrow, but his eyes glowed faintly blue, and his form shimmered, translucent. Elara, he said, voice echoing as if from a great distance. You shouldn't have come. Are you a ghost? She choked out. A guardian, he replied. The Wraith, it's not what they think. It's the forest's spirit, twisted by the villagers' fear. It needed a keeper, someone to balance the curse. I volunteered. Elara's chest ached. But you're trapped here. I chose this, he said gently. The Wraith's power sustains me, but it's a fragile bond. If I leave, the forest will fall to rot, and the village will follow. She stepped closer, tears blurring her vision. There has to be another way. Cale shook his head. The villagers must learn to respect the forest, not fear it. But that's a battle for another day. He reached out, his hand passing through hers like mist. You can stay, or go, but if you leave, you must never speak of this. The choice. Elara stared at the pendant, its light dimming. To stay meant joining Cale in this twilight existence, bound to the forest's endless vigil. To leave meant carrying the weight of silence, her brother's fate a secret that could save them all, or destroy her. Memories flickered, Kale teaching her to track, his laughter as they raced through sunlit fields. She owed him the truth, but the village needed hope. "I'll go," she said finally, "but I'll tell them you're at peace." Kale smiled, sad and proud. "Thank you, little shadow." The grove began to fade, the silver light swallowing him. "Visit sometimes," his voice lingered. "The forest likes you. Return to the light." Elara emerged at dusk, her cloak in tatters, the pendant cold. The villagers crowded around, relief and dread mingling on their faces. Elder Mara took her hands. "Did you find him?" Elara met her eyes, steady. "He's gone. The forest. Let him go." It wasn't a lie, not entirely. The pendant she slipped into her pocket, a secret as heavy as the truth. That night, she stood at her window, gazing at the tree line. Somewhere in the dark, Kale walked the shadows, a guardian between worlds. She would keep his secret, but she'd also plant seeds of change. In time, the villagers might learn to see the forest not as a monster, but a wounded thing, yearning to heal. And in her dreams, she heard the pines whisper, "Thank you."